Deep in the ancient granite quarries of Aswan, Egypt, where trenches carved thousands of years ago still scar the desert rock, a team of scientists gathered around glowing screens. They had loaded thousands of high-resolution photographs, precise photogrammetric scans, and microscopic surface data from the Unfinished Obelisk, from drill cores in museum collections, and from the perfectly flat granite boxes of Saqqara. Then they asked an advanced AI system, the same kind of objective pattern analysis tool built to examine evidence without bias, one direct question. How did the ancient Egyptians actually cut, drill, and shape this incredibly hard granite, with only the tools and materials available in the Bronze Age? The answer that emerged did not invent secret machines or rewrite history overnight. Instead, it highlighted real measurements, exact replication results, and microscopic signatures that most people have never been shown. The details shocked everyone who still believes ancient technology was nothing more than crude hammering and simple sand. What the evidence actually reveals is a level of material mastery, abrasive engineering, and organized precision that challenges the simplified story we have all been told. If discovering these hidden chapters of real ancient capability matters to you, subscribe right now and turn on notifications. You're about to see the specific experiments, the catalogued artifacts, and the laboratory proof that even an objective review of the data cannot ignore. For centuries, the standard explanation has been simple and widely repeated. Ancient Egyptians cut granite by pounding it with balls of dolerite, a harder stone, and by sawing it with copper blades using ordinary desert sand as an abrasive. On the surface, this explanation appears reasonable until you examine the actual hardness values involved. Granite typically registers between 6 and 7 on the Mohs scale of mineral hardness. Pure copper sits far lower, around 3. A soft metal should not be able to cut a much harder stone with any efficiency. Yet the monuments stand as proof that something worked. The shock arrives when you discover how little of the real story reaches popular understanding. The details of controlled replications performed on the actual quarry stone, the microscopic signatures inside ancient drill holes, and the direct chemical evidence of high-performance abrasives have remained largely confined to technical papers. Most people never hear these specifics. They hear only the simplified version and assume ancient technology must have been crude and limited. The real story begins with the work of Dennis Stocks, an engineer who spent more than 20 years reconstructing ancient Egyptian stoneworking tools and testing them under realistic conditions. In 2001, he conducted a series of experiments directly inside the Aswan granite quarries. Using replica toothless copper saw blades and nothing but local desert sand mixed with water as the abrasive modern quarry workers successfully cut into rose granite after setting aside their modern power equipment for the test. The process required steady pressure, frequent reapplication of fresh abrasive slurry, and patience, but it produced clean cuts. For drilling, Stocks followed ancient tomb depictions and used a bow-driven copper tube with the same sand abrasive. 3 men operating the bow and maintaining downward pressure sank a circular hole 6 centimeters deep into solid granite in 20 hours. When the core was removed, the concentric striations and the slight taper from top to bottom matched the ancient drill cores recovered from the Giza pyramids and examined by Flinders Petrie more than a century earlier. The similarity was not superficial. Engineers comparing both the ancient and the modern cores noted the same pattern of marks created by the same physical process. This replication matters because it happened on the real stone, using the real local materials. It was not performed in a laboratory with ideal conditions or modern conveniences. The result demonstrates that the method was practical for ancient work crews, even if it demanded teams of skilled craftsmen working in coordinated rotation over long periods. The same quarries that supplied the granite for obelisks, statues, and temple elements still contain the physical record of how that granite was removed. Wide trenches were created by repeated pounding with handheld dolerite balls. A 2023 photogrammetric study conducted at the Unfinished Obelisk site measured the removal rate at approximately 216 cubic centimeters of granite per hour, when workers struck at an average of 85 impacts per minute. That quantified figure shows both the immense labor required and the effectiveness of the technique when applied consistently by organized teams. The unfinished obelisk itself, a block that would have stood over 42 meters tall and weighed more than 1,000 tons if completed, still displays the pounding trenches on all sides. A prominent natural crack runs through the stone. Early 20th century studies documented this fracture clearly. Ancient engineers recognized the risk and stopped work rather than risk losing the entire block. This was not a mysterious abandonment. It was a practical engineering decision based on direct observation of material behavior. The deeper layer of evidence comes from what cannot be seen with the naked eye. Scanning electron microscopy, performed on silicone impressions taken from ancient tubular drill holes, reveals regular concentric lines running inside the holes. Early observers wondered whether such consistent marks required jewel points permanently fixed into the copper tube. Later, functional analysis demonstrated a more elegant solution entirely within the capabilities of Bronze Age craftsmen. As the copper tube rotates under pressure with abrasive slurry present, individual hard mineral grains temporarily embed into the softer copper surface. For several rotations, these embedded grains act like fixed cutting teeth, carving deeper and more regular grooves before they eventually break free or wear down. This process, known as lap drilling, produces the characteristic striations seen on ancient cores, without any requirement for ultrasonic vibration or permanently set diamonds. Replications using only copper tubing, abrasive slurry, and hand-applied pressure consistently reproduce the same pattern of marks. The famous drill core catalogued as UC16036 in the Petrie Museum, often referred to as core number 7, shows grooves whose spacing and depth fall within the range that lap drilling with variable hand pressure and natural variation in crystal hardness can create. Petrie himself described the spiral in places as resembling a drunken screw, with small irregularities caused by the differing hardness of quartz and feldspar crystals within the granite. Modern replications produce exactly this kind of variable yet recognizable pattern. Even more direct physical proof exists in the form of residue preserved inside an ancient drill hole. Scanning electron microscopy combined with energy dispersive X-ray spectroscopy performed on material from a hardstone artifact in the Metropolitan Museum collection identified abundant angular particles of corundum, aluminum oxide, with a hardness of 9 on the Mohs scale. These particles were mixed with quartz and other minerals. Corundum cuts granite dramatically more efficiently than ordinary sand. Its presence in actual ancient residue demonstrates that Egyptian craftsmen deliberately selected or acquired high-performance abrasives when projects demanded greater efficiency or precision. This was not random collection of whatever sand lay nearby. It was informed material selection based on observable results. The finished artifacts carry their own record of capability. The large granite boxes inside the Serapeum at Saqqara display surfaces that are flat to within a few thousandths of an inch, across substantial areas and internal corners that approach true right angles. Achieving this level of precision across large surfaces is not the result of casual hammering or guesswork. It requires systematic grinding with progressively finer abrasives against true reference surfaces, combined with templates, straight edges, and careful measurement. Recent work using reflectance transformation. Imaging on granite statues and hieroglyphs has revealed the distinct signatures left by different tools and techniques. Percussive work with flint or chert chisels produces microspalling at grain boundaries. Abrasive finishing produces smoother, more controlled traces. Experiments replicating both approaches on Aswan granite generate marks that align closely with those observed on ancient examples. The craftsman exercised precise control over fracture propagation and abrasive action, skills developed and transmitted across generations. Additional laboratory work completed in 2026 explored another possible approach using materials the Egyptians already employed in large quantities. Experiments with molten natron, sodium carbonate central to their glass-making, faience production, and mummification processes, demonstrated that granite can be cracked or even disintegrated at approximately 900 degrees Celsius through a combination of thermal shock and chemical reaction. While this technique has not yet been confirmed as a primary method at the Aswan quarries, it uses only substances and temperatures the ancients already commanded. It illustrates how chemical knowledge may have supplemented mechanical methods in ways that remain under investigation. When these separate lines of evidence are considered together, the emerging picture is one of sophisticated material understanding rather than primitive limitation. The Egyptians learned how to make soft copper effective through the physics of abrasive action. They identified and acquired higher hardness minerals when projects required greater performance. They maintained alignment and consistent pressure during extended drilling operations. They organized labor at a scale capable of moving and shaping thousands of tons of granite for monuments that still stand. The initial shock many people experience comes from realizing how far these methods exceed the simplified image of ancient technology that most of us received. The methods were not crude. They were highly adapted to the materials available and remarkably effective when executed by skilled teams. Questions nevertheless remain. Certain scoop-shaped marks across large areas of the Aswan quarry display a level of consistency in size, spacing, and curvature that continues to prompt discussion among engineers and archaeologists. Some finished surfaces on large granite elements reach flatness and angular tolerances that test the practical limits of hand methods, even when excellent abrasives and experienced craftsmen are involved. An objective examination of the complete dataset leaves these measurements visible rather than explaining them away. It also leaves the proven replication results visible. Both sets of observations can be held at the same time. The ancient Egyptians demonstrated extraordinary capability with the tools and knowledge they possessed, and certain aspects of their work continue to invite closer study and further experimentation. This balance between demonstrated achievement and remaining questions forms the deeper story. Throughout history, advanced technical knowledge has frequently been controlled, reinterpreted, or only partially preserved. During the Amarna period, earlier records connected to technological or religious practices were deliberately altered or removed. In subsequent religious transitions, many sites and texts suffered damage or deliberate reframing. In the 19th century, major scholarly publication projects sometimes emphasized particular interpretations while giving less attention to evidence that complicated the emerging narrative. In the present day, access to high-resolution scanning and detailed study of certain restricted chambers and contexts can be limited by rules framed around structural safety or national heritage protection. The practical outcome is that independent verification of key measurements and contexts proceeds more slowly than it otherwise might. Experimental successes and microscopic findings published in specialist journals rarely reach general audiences. Most people continue to receive only the simplest version of events. The quantified removal rates, the corundum particle evidence, the lap drilling mechanism, and the precise tolerances on finished artifacts remain largely unknown outside technical circles. When the full collection of available data is assembled and examined without inherited assumptions, the result is rarely a single dramatic claim of ancient industrial equipment. Instead, it produces a clearer map of what has been firmly demonstrated through replication and direct analysis, and what continues to require additional investigation. The demonstrated portion is already substantial. Large-scale, high-precision granite working was achievable with copper alloys, stone tools, carefully chosen abrasives, and disciplined human organization. That capability was present by the early Old Kingdom. It did not emerge suddenly from nowhere. It implies earlier periods of experimentation and knowledge transmission that may have been disrupted by the environmental and population changes associated with the end of the last ice age. Inscriptions that refer to earlier destroyed houses or worlds may preserve fragmented memories of capabilities that were later partially recovered or redeveloped. The physical evidence preserved in the granite itself stands independently of how those textual references are ultimately interpreted. Limitations on access continue to affect how quickly new data can be gathered and verified. Certain areas beneath the Giza Plateau, specific sections of major temple complexes, and newly identified features at other sites remain closed to detailed independent scanning or require extended approval processes. Researchers who have sought high-resolution documentation of particular contexts have sometimes encountered obstacles presented in terms of structural safety or heritage management. Whether these restrictions are fully justified in every case, or whether they also serve to slow independent examination, the effect is the same: slower accumulation of publicly available high-quality data. Meanwhile, the dominant public narrative continues to favor the simplest possible account. The gap between what appears in technical publications and what reaches general audiences persists. The granite itself preserves an unambiguous record. Tool marks, drill cores, abrasive residues, quarry trenches, and finished surfaces all document what was actually done. When these records are studied using photogrammetry, scanning electron microscopy, reflectance transformation imaging, and controlled replication under realistic conditions, they reveal a coherent story of human ingenuity operating at a high level within the constraints of Bronze Age resources. The story is not yet complete. New measurements and new replications continue to refine the details, but the central finding is already established. The ancient Egyptians cut and shaped granite using methods significantly more advanced and effective than the simplified version most people have encountered. They possessed practical knowledge of abrasives, fracture mechanics, and large-scale project organization that produced results still studied and admired today. We have now reached the point where the accumulated evidence requires an honest decision. Either we accept that Bronze Age craftsmen reached levels of engineering precision and material mastery that modern experimental archaeology has only recently begun to replicate and fully document, or we continue to search for explanations that invoke technologies for which no physical trace has ever been recovered from the archaeological record. The first position aligns with everything that has been demonstrated through on-site testing in Aswan, through microscopic examination of ancient artifacts, and through controlled replications in multiple laboratories. The second position requires assumptions that extend beyond the currently available physical evidence. An objective review of the data supports the demonstrated methods while keeping legitimate remaining questions open for continued research and experimentation. That openness is what gives the investigation its continuing power. Every additional high-resolution scan, every new replication that matches ancient signatures more closely, and every chemical analysis of preserved residues adds another verified element to the picture. The unfinished obelisk still rests in its trench with the crack clearly visible, a monument to both ambition and the real limits imposed by the material itself. The drill cores preserved in museum collections still carry the grooves that record the physics of ancient drilling operations. The granite boxes and sarcophagi still display surfaces worked to tolerances that speak of patient, systematic mastery sustained across generations. These artifacts continue to reward closer examination. If the evidence presented in this investigation has already changed how you understand ancient Egyptian capability, take a moment right now to like this video and subscribe if you have not already done so. Your support allows deeper explorations of this kind to continue. Comment below with the specific detail that struck you most strongly. Was it the 6 centimeters of drilling achieved in 20 hours that produced cores matching those from the Giza pyramids? The discovery of angular corundum particles of hardness 9 inside an actual ancient drill hole? The quantified removal rate of 216 cubic centimeters per hour, measured by photogrammetry, or the lap drilling mechanism that explains consistent grooves without requiring advanced machinery? Your observations help bring these documented facts to wider attention. Share this video with anyone who continues to believe that ancient Egyptians worked granite using only crude stone tools and brute force. The full body of published experimental and microscopic evidence deserves to be more widely known. We are approaching the conclusion of this examination, yet one additional layer deserves clear statement. The advanced knowledge of granite working, visible in the early Old Kingdom, did not continue at the same intensity or scale into later historical periods. After the New Kingdom, the volume and precision of major hardstone projects declined in many regions. Techniques that had once been standard appear to have become rarer or were practiced in modified forms. This pattern of high achievement followed by partial loss and later relearning appears across several ancient technologies. The causes likely include periods of social and political disruption, the loss of specialized knowledge lineages when skilled practitioners were no longer able to transmit their craft, and possibly larger-scale environmental or population changes. What matters for the present discussion is that the physical record preserves clear evidence of a peak of capability that later generations did not fully maintain. Recognizing that peak does not require belief in vanished super-civilizations possessing technology beyond what the evidence supports. It requires only that we examine the surviving artifacts and experimental replications without the assumption that ancient people lacked the capacity for sustained excellence and systematic innovation. The researchers and independent investigators who assembled the available datasets and subjected them to systematic, objective review did not depart with claims that ancient Egyptians possessed 20th century industrial equipment. They departed with a renewed appreciation for what disciplined human skill, careful observation, and persistent effort can accomplish even with limited materials, along with a more sharply defined set of remaining questions concerning production rates, surface regularity, and the possible contribution of supplementary techniques. That combination of firmly demonstrated mastery and clearly acknowledged open questions represents the most useful and honest outcome. It keeps genuine discovery and further experimentation moving forward instead of prematurely closing the case with an incomplete explanation. Stand once more in imagination before the unfinished obelisk. The trenches created by repeated pounding with dolerite balls extend far into the surrounding rock. The crack that ultimately halted extraction cuts directly across the intended form of the monument. Nearby smaller test cuts and partially completed trenches show the process of trial, adjustment, and refinement that preceded the main extraction attempt. Every visible mark records decisions made by people who understood the behavior of their stone and the performance of their tools at a level that modern researchers are still working to recover in full detail. When contemporary measurement technologies and controlled replications are applied to those same marks, the decisions become intelligible and the results become reproducible. The initial sense of shock gives way to recognition of genuine ancient capability, and that recognition in turn opens the door to the next set of precise questions that still require answers. Thank you for remaining with this investigation through to its conclusion. If the documented facts presented here have shifted your perspective on what ancient Egypt achieved with the resources available to it, like this video, subscribe to receive the next installments in the series, and share your thoughts in the comments section. The following chapter will examine a particular group of inscriptions that some researchers have interpreted as containing technical descriptions of energy sources and resonance-related methods connected to the same stoneworking traditions discussed in this investigation. The physical evidence is already present in the archaeological record. We only need to continue examining it with care and without premature conclusions. Until that next chapter appears, continue to question the simplified accounts you have encountered. Continue to look directly at the surviving stone itself. And remember that the granite still preserves answers for those willing to study the documented details with patience and precision. Subscribe, like this video, leave your comments, and share it with others who deserve to know what the evidence actually shows. The real history of human achievement is still being read from the marks left behind in stone.